Good evening. This is Maestro Cortella here to talk a bit about Dawn of War 2 Retribution. Now, today, I'm actually not really going to be casting, even though I have a game here. I'm just going to be actually kind of celebrating that this is my 1-year anniversary of casting. My first cast went up on September 26, 2012. As the time of this recording, it is September 26th, 2013, although I don't know if I'll be able to upload this video by then. And just kind of celebrating that I started casting, not really necessarily expecting it to go anywhere, and things started off very slowly until someone said, you know, you should post your casts on game replays. And things just started to take off from there. And 1 year and about 1,400 subscribers later, and this is now where I am. So basically, this is a vlog. I just want to talk about things, and I put a game here just so that people would actually still watch and have something to look at. But some updates about things. I know people have been wondering about Red Rupee, and I don't entirely know what's up with as far as his casting, but I mean, he's still alive and well, just in case people were wondering. I am friends with him on Facebook, and last I checked with him earlier this month, he was spending time on the beach with his girlfriend. So, I also caught him playing Tomb Raider on Steam one day. Another thing that's coming up is that this weekend there is a tournament going on, July Monthly Rumble number 4. I will actually not be casting or playing. I'm generally busy now on the time that the tournaments are happening, but I certainly suggest watching it. There are a lot of good players in the upcoming tournament, a lot of big names who have at least signed up. Hopefully they will also show up. Tex, Toilet Lee, Noisy Elmo, Asmon, Floyd, trying to think of who else. But I was actually like looking at the people who have signed up, and there was something like at least 7 or 8 really good players, like 7 or 8 players who could theoretically be the one to actually take the whole tournament. So I think at this point signups are probably closed, but I certainly suggest watching it. People who will probably be streaming, most likely Codex, maybe also Uncle Milty, Blessed Spartan will probably be streaming. I suggest tuning in. I think last time we had about 100 viewers watching the live streams for the finals. But some other things I wanted to talk about. Now, of course, this is a Dawn of War 2 channel. And, of course, I originally started out with Elite Mod, and I've since branched out a little bit into some other things, doing a little bit of Codex Edition, doing a little bit of Company of Heroes 2. And I've kind of been gauging kind of how well these things have been received. Now, clearly Codex Edition is something that a lot of people want to see. And on the other side of things, Company of Heroes 2 did not really turn out to be as desired as I expected. It's obviously less desired, and I've even been realizing that I don't like it as much as Dawn of War 2 either, so I probably won't be doing that as much anymore. Unless something happens like it just starts happening that Dawn of War 2 actually ends up kind of dying, which is something that I don't want to happen. I'd actually like to keep doing Dawn of War 2 pretty much as long as there are games to cast. But certainly this is a small community, and although I hate to say it, I often can't help but wonder, like, how much time does this game have left? And if that happens, like, I always just wonder, like, what I would do. Now, one of the things I've been realizing that I also have, like, kind of different, trying to consider my audience. I've been realizing that, like, even my audience has kind of diversity among the audience. There are the people who actually play the game and are very competitive about it, and who are really interested in the mechanics of the game and the competitive gameplay. And then there are actually quite a few people who, it seems, that are not necessarily that hardcore about the game, and maybe don't even necessarily play Dawn of War 2, but they're Warhammer fans, and for them this is like Warhammer TV, and I think that's really cool too. And I certainly want to appeal to those people, since I think they probably represent a big part of the viewership, both for my channel and probably even more so for Indrid's channel.
So the generator is online. We have an edge for now.
But another thing that's also important is what I want to do. I'm very much an intrinsically motivated person, and I'm not just going to do purely what other people want to do if it's not something that I don't feel like doing. I'll probably be more or less discontinuing Company of Heroes 2, since it's something that both my viewership doesn't really care too much for, as well as something that I've kind of lost interest in. Codex Edition I'll probably keep up to the extent that there's actually stuff to cast. I'm more interested in covering Elite Mod, but I can tell that the interest in Codex Edition among my viewership is very, very high. Now, one of the other things I guess I wanted to talk about is there's this matter of casting style. I've received both complaints as well as praise for the way that I choose to cast. In particular, there are times when I try to get more technical, explain things in a lot more detail and at a deeper level. And this is something that some people really like and some people don't really have the patience for. And I get that. And I get that this is something that does not appeal to everyone, but this is part of the way I want to do things. I've really liked, in my own experience, of watching casting channels. Channels that have really helped me understand things at a deeper level, and that really try to go into that analysis. Some examples, even back when it was Harlequin, I remember him commenting on a match where he saw where a player purchased an avatar, and then right after the player lost the avatar, that player just started building a new avatar. And the comment that Harlequin added after that was, if he had enough resources to purchase a new avatar right after losing an avatar, he could have been buying more units to support his original avatar and keep his original avatar alive while having a bigger army. Another thing that I really liked was I would watch a channel called Inverse TV. This is a Company of Heroes channel that's very, very strategically oriented, and a channel that has definitely inspired my 1v1 casting style. And he would comment about how a certain player named Aljaz would go for a long, extended, and even inefficient Tier 1 in that game. And it would seem to be like not a good idea, but it would, by having such a big Tier 1 with so much fighting power, he would be able to gain map control, which would allow him to secure an economic advantage and thus tech advantage that would ultimately allow him to win the game. So that's just a lot of my interest as far as actually casting. I really like that style. Now, this is something that I mostly do more in 1v1. Just 3v3 and even 2v2 games are just a little too crazy and too fast to really take that kind of time, because then I really lose track of what's going on the screen. But part of just the way I try to do things is that I'm really interested in, again, not to disparage anyone, to disparage different styles that don't try to do what I do, but I really want to try to basically do more than just narrate what's happening on the screen. I try to not only analyze things, but I try to analyze in a way that is very broad, takes into consideration the big picture, and really isn't narrow. Really try to consider as many things as I possibly can. And you know, one example I can think of there is that there was a player a while ago, an Imperial Guard player, who complained that he said the Manticore is not a good unit. And that was in response to a lot of other people complaining about the Manticore. And his argument for the Manticore not being good was, he said that it's good against bad players and bad against good players, because good players will just react and dodge the Manticore, and then the Manticore won't actually do anything. And in a way, he has a point, but he only has one point, one very narrow point, when there really are so many other things to consider in that situation. A Manticore is going to be much more effective against a bad player than against a good player. It's going to be much more effective against someone who just stands there and gets hit by it than someone who actually tries to dodge the Manticore or retreat out of it. But there are so many other consequences to a Manticore that this person was not considering. First of all, a Manticore taxes micro. It forces that kind of extra awareness that you need to develop and that you need to have at all times. It also punishes blobbing, so if you have someone who's blobbing, they need to start splitting their units, and that's another way of taxing micro. And by taxing micro, you can be forcing more mistakes. And forcing more mistakes, the Manticore is something where, even though good players are better at dodging it, it's something where the potential payoff is so huge that even if a good player has even one time where they do not react quickly enough, it can have extremely severe consequences, since the Manticore is so powerful that it can wipe certain squads in a single volley. In particular, setup teams can get wiped from a single Manticore volley from full health. Even squishier squads like Heretics can actually get wiped from a single Manticore rocket. So there's actually 3 chances where you could wipe the entire squad in a Manticore volley. And then there's also the things like the fact that a Manticore denies the use of garrisons, because as long as you have a Manticore out on the field on a map with garrisons, the garrisons become a death trap. And I'd say probably just finally is the fact that the Manticore, yeah, you can, well, not finally, because there are a few more. A Manticore can be dodged if you have fast units that do not need to do anything like set up or unset up. And in particular, one of the uses of the Manticore is as a setup counter. No matter how fast you react to that, setup teams can't dodge Manticores the way that non-setup units can. And then finally, even if you just retreat away from a Manticore as a way of cutting your losses and not losing like squads and models, you're still losing map control. If someone retreats their units and retreats multiple squads, they're losing map control because they're taking most of their fighting force off the field. And that's also something that is a strategic advantage of the Manticore. And I'm not trying to say that the Manticore is overpowered. It certainly is powerful, but I also believe, especially now that I play Imperial Guard a little bit more and have some experience with that race, that I think Imperial Guard would really, I think Imperial Guard kind of needs the Manticore with the way the rest of the race is designed, and that they would, in some ways, kind of be a little screwed without it. So that's just a lot of things I said about one unit. It can get very dry and academic, and I understand that it can get that way. And I'm someone with kind of an academic background. I do have a degree from a very highly rated university. And advanced analytical and verbal skills are just one of my strengths, and that's part of what I try to bring to my casting. And, before I get more into those technical details of trying to go into those really specific gameplay elements, I want to talk about just some community issues. There have been complaints by newer players. They brought it up on forums, on YouTube comments, and on the Elite Mod chat about the community. And the Dawn of War 2 community and the Elite community, it is a little insular. It's a lot of people who all know each other and play each other, like, they all know who everyone is. It's just a community where you know who everyone is, as opposed to, you play a game like StarCraft or Counter-Strike, where if you just go into public servers, you're hardly ever going to run into the same people unless you make a point of running into those same people again by connecting with them using a lot of the social media functions of things like Steam or the built-in social media functions of a game like StarCraft. And there are things to consider on both sides. First of all, for the newer players, it really is discouraging and unpleasant to be kicked out of games and to have people basically just have exclusive attitudes towards a lot of the new people who are trying to get into the game, and that really does hurt the game. And part of what I think the more experienced players need to do is, first of all, I think we need to change the language a bit more. We need to stop using words like noob, noob cake, nub, or scrub, a lot of things like that, which are just inherently very disparaging, even though they're just meant to describe someone who is new to the game. Just say you're new to the game. New inexperienced is just a better way of saying it. And these may sound like just like small differences in wording, but it really does make a difference. Now, as someone who is actually at this point a more experienced player, I also get the side of the more experienced players, especially as someone who I work about 17 to 18 hours a week, which may not seem like a lot, but I'm also doing graduate school as well. My time is fairly limited, and when I do actually want to play the game, I want to have a fun, enjoyable game that really challenges me. And there are times when, just in a public game, I will play a game. I will play with people who are, to be honest, not as good as me. And I do actually feel kind of bored and unsatisfied. Now, one of the answers to that people already do is that many of the better players already do host games that are private. And then they just invite the people that they want. And those are especially for really a lot of the at the higher level end, which is, I think, really the best thing to do if you really want to keep games, if you really want to have those games that are just strictly high level and don't necessarily want to deal with players who can't keep up. Now, as far as including newer players, I certainly don't want to be exclusive myself, but one of the things that I think that some of the new players have to understand is that it isn't necessarily the responsibility of, although it would really be nice, it isn't necessarily the responsibility of the more experienced players to really be the ones to teach those newer players how to play. And it certainly is nice. Players like Codex have done learning sessions to help players learn how to play the game, and so has Kvek. And that's something that's really nice, but it's not really an obligation for anyone in the community. Again, because myself, even though I would definitely have the capability to help teach players how to play, I'm very busy, already just taking care of a lot of things in my own life. And it's just too much to take on the responsibility of really dedicating myself outside of my casting to teaching new players how to play the game. And one of the things that new players even have to consider is that if you really do want to learn the game, it really does take some just extra initiative and extra motivation, as well as some emotional fortitude to just tough out the challenges of learning a new game, dealing with the learning curve, dealing with the fact that for now you don't know what you're doing and you have to just learn the hard way sometimes by making those mistakes, and that not everybody's going to be nice along the way. For those of us who have played the game a while and are very experienced about it, realize that there have probably been times when we screwed up and there was someone there who was not nice about it for us. I've been there myself. I've been there in times where learning this game, playing 3v3s, or even when I first started playing Elite Mod and playing 2v2s, when there were people who got really angry at me for not being able to keep up in a game and ultimately losing the game for them. I've even had experiences myself where I've played with newer players and I've lost because I was playing with people who could not keep up. And I'll be honest and say that it was actually a frustrating experience and I did not enjoy it. That being said, I am generally careful about how I treat those people because I know what it's like. And I am very, very rarely going to be rude or discouraging to them. I think the situation where I had the least patience was when I teamed with someone in a 2v2, and I knew that the player was inexperienced, and I just went ahead and I was going to deal with it. And what happened was I was playing, I was getting doubled, and I lost my entire power farm. And then I looked over at my teammate, and I realized that he was just standing by over on his side and literally not doing anything. And I said to him, you need to, like, play. and his response was, "I need to hold here." And this was a situation where I was getting doubled. It was a double cap against us, and his response was, "I need to hold here," on his single VP. And I kind of just said to him, "No, you don't." And that was the least patience I've ever had for a newer player who was kind of didn't really know what to do, and basically the rudest I had ever been. And compared to other things I have seen, and even things that people have said to me, it's fairly tame. But one of the things just to say is that, to be honest, it's tough. It's tough being in that situation where you're first learning a new game. And many of us who are newer to the game, part of the advantage we have is just the fact that we've already been through it, and at this point we're past it. And now it's easier for us, but when we learned, I really don't think it was any less difficult. And there's also some people ask, like, oh, should I start out with retail or should I just jump right into elite mod? Personally, some people have said, oh, retail is terrible, just start out with elite mod. I really don't like the balance of retail, but if you are more comfortable learning the game that way, and there are players who are going to be at lower levels in there who are not going to make you feel as discouraged, then I absolutely recommend playing retail to get more comfortable. Some people say you will learn bad habits because there are differences in the game, but you will be learning a lot of the foundational things that you need to succeed in elite mod, which will transfer over. So I've talked about a lot of different things. I wanted to talk about I always see comments and things on the forums or in YouTube comments. On the YouTube comments, there's just not enough space for me to respond. Not enough character space in the YouTube comments. And on the forums, I usually just don't want to take the time to write out a whole big thing. But there are just a lot of things where people get stuck on. Again, I try to make things very broad, try to consider as many things as I possibly can. When I'm thinking about just anything in this game, trying to consider how the game works, the mechanics of the game, and the balance of the game. And I get concerned that people are thinking of things in a sense that is a little too more narrow. One of the things that really got to me was a discussion on the message boards about the artillery spotters versus jump units, and talking about, like, oh, jump units are hard counters to set up teams. Artillery spotters, are they hard counters or are they soft counters? And like one of the things I want to do is like get away from this obsession with like a lot of these terms that I don't like and don't use. I mean, I probably have used hard counter and soft counter before, but I'm not too fond of them. I like to try to just describe a counter in terms of everything it does and what the implications are of that and what the advantages and disadvantages are of that. So, for example, something like an artillery spotter has certain advantages and disadvantages over, say, jump units. And since this game is about to end, I'm actually going to start a new game. And just to... Alright. So I was talking about people getting a little stuck on terminology and kind of just even being obsessed with, like, is something a hard counter or a soft counter? And in particular, I was bringing up artillery spotters compared to jump units. And this is something, the Imperial Guard design has always been, it's a bit different from the rest of the races, and it's something that both hurts and helps Imperial Guard. I'm actually on the opinion that it hurts them a little more compared to other races. But just looking at things like artillery spotters versus jump units, and the argument is, like, are these hard counters and which one is a hard counter? Part of the thing to understand is in something like Assault Space Marines is used to counter a setup team. But that's really not the only thing that it does. And Assault Space Marines are a melee unit, and they have a lot of fighting capabilities. So, and because of things like knockback, you can have them actually jump into just about any infantry unit you want. You can jump them into a non-setup ranged unit, and they will counter that unit. And Assault Space Marines are unique among jump units because of the fact that you can even jump into melee units using the disruption, and then continue to disrupt with things like Merciless Strike, Scout Shotguns. So these are, again, even more things I'm considering. We're not just considering the unit itself, but considering its synergy with the rest of the army. So there's a whole lot of things there that Assault Space Marines do that a unit like Artillery Spotters can't. Another thing is that, again, the Assault Space Marines, because they're an actual melee unit with actual fighting capabilities, they have a certain amount of independent follow-up that something like Artillery Spotters won't have. So the Artillery Spotters can't really do much to fight after they do the action that allows them to counter setup teams, whereas Assault Space Marines continue to apply that pressure by the fact that they are actually a melee unit with actual fighting capabilities. Now, what I just said sounds like it mostly favors the Assault Space Marines, but there are things to consider for the Artillery Spotters as well. First of all, there's the fact that Artillery Spotters, one of the big things is that Artillery Spotters, this is supposed to both a disadvantage and an advantage, is that they are not a jump unit. So they don't have that they can't put on that persistent pressure that a squad of Assault Space Marines does, because they aren't there to follow up with more damage after the initial disruption, and they rely on the rest of their army to do that. But it also means they don't carry the inherent risk of a jump unit, which is you're jumping your jump unit into potentially into your opponent's entire army and putting them at huge risk for bleeding and being counter-initiated against, especially against things like Howling Banshees. So a squad of Artillery Spotters doesn't carry that risk. They're kept very safe behind enemy lines. And the way you would counter a squad of Artillery Spotters is very different from how you would counter Assault Space Marines. You would counter Assault Space Marines with counter-initiation by a dedicated melee unit, whereas you would actually counter Artillery Spotters with a jump unit like Assault Space Marines. And there are so many different things to consider in there, as well as the other kinds of jump units that are in the game, which, again, just have slightly different implications compared to Assault Space Marines, where Raptors, for example, don't have the disruptions that Assault Space Marines have, so they don't have that kind of safety net when jumping in against other melee units, which is a terrible idea with Raptors. However, they do have the synergy with Heretics as a melee follow-up, which is a whole lot more deadly than any of the potential damage coming out of, say, the Space Marine army following up with Assault Space Marines. So again, in all of that, I did not try to say whether this is a hard counter or a soft counter and try to narrowly stick to that definitions, but try to just go through the characteristics, the traits, the abilities, and just what all the implications are and what are all the things you can do with all those abilities. But since, just to take another little break from the technical side of things, one of the things I wanted to say about this being like Warhammer TV is that I was even considering things. I wanted to look forward into the future. I was wondering if I should actually buy Space Hulk and even post a few videos of that. Post some Let's Plays. I think it has a multiplayer. But I ultimately didn't because I wasn't sure if it was a game I would like, and I'm also someone who does not like to buy games at full price. And I wasn't, and again, I wasn't sure if that was a game that I would really like. It's probably something that a lot of my viewership would like to see, but I'm not sure if it's something that I really want to do. Another thing to consider down along the lines in the future is Dawn of War 3. Now, this is something where at this point, Relic has, or not Relic, but maybe Relic, someone has said that there's a strong possibility of it. And I certainly want to at least check out Dawn of War 3, but at the same time, I'm even wondering, will Dawn of War 3 even be a game that I will like? Because, to be honest, I actually don't really like Dawn of War 1 that much. I played it, and it was enough to get me into, like, the universe, because I really liked the universe, as well as the voice acting and the atmosphere. But one of the things that I really didn't like about Dawn of War 1 was the gameplay. I just didn't like the way it played, and I still don't. And if Dawn of War 3 is actually more like Dawn of War 1, then that might not even be something I would be willing to do. And in that case, I might even go back to Company of Heroes, because although I do consider myself a Warhammer fan, I'm also very much a gameplay person as well, and my interest in Dawn of War 2 really does have a lot to do with the actual gameplay and how it plays, and I'm very interested in the competitive gameplay of Dawn of War 2. Now, of course, this is a long way off, and we'll see. And again, just to reiterate, which the part that I mentioned before, which is just I'd like to keep doing Dawn of War 2 as long as I possibly can. Some of the other things to consider, I've just been thinking of ways to branch out and differentiate. A while ago, I said when I made my last little vlog thing, where I said it was an announcement and I just had a picture of my logo instead of a game to watch as well, is that I said I was going to do some video guides as well as, yeah, basically I said I was going to do some video guides. And I guess technically my demonstration videos for Codex Edition kind of count as that, but I meant sorcerer guides. And that's something where I started to do that, and I have one unfinished guide. And it's unfinished just because, as it turns out, making a guide is actually a lot more difficult and time-consuming than casting. Even though the ultimate product would end up being shorter. I'm still thinking I'm gonna try to finish at least the one that I've already started. But it actually really is a lot of work to do a guide. First of all, it's a lot more video editing, and it's also actually a lot harder to get all of the exact footage that you actually need. Whereas with a cast, you just have a game, and just whatever's in there. That's just what you need for a cast, just whatever's in the game. Whereas a guide, you really need very specific footage demonstrating exactly what you want to show, which can actually be a lot harder to find. But just a few more things that have actually bothered me a little bit. There's another thing, because part of the whole way I got into casting is that I've spent a ton of time watching casts on my own. Watching Harlequin, watching Red Rupee, watching Indrid. I also watch some Company of Heroes casts. In particular, my favorites have been the Frontline Network and Inverse TV. And of course, I also read the comments a lot. And again, the comments are things that are again full with people who are saying things about the game and making comments on things. And one of my big complaints is that their perspective is often just a little too narrow. They're often focusing on just one thing and not really looking at the big picture. So one of the things that really came up recently, and actually comes up quite a bit, is about knobs. It came up on a recent Indrid video, and knobs are a unit that very frequently come up. And you know what? I personally believe that knobs are a very powerful unit, and I won't complain that they are overpowered. But there's also some arguments about, like, how do you deal with them? Can you deal with them? And are they overpowered? Now, for any tier 3 unit, generally speaking, for any tier 3 unit, it's usually not sufficient just to have one unit that counters it. Usually a tier 3 unit requires several units to interact together to counter it. So something for, like, knobs, you need a source of disruption, you need a source of suppression, you need something to do damage to the knobs. You need control and damage, and those don't always necessarily come in one package. Sometimes even your sources of control against knobs might not necessarily be adequate, because they either a unit might have a way of breaking that control, or the control might not last long enough. So in the case of knobs, let's say you're trying to counter knobs with Space Marines. First of all, you have shotgun scouts, which are good for disrupting knobs, but that's very temporary. Then you also have devastators, which can suppress knobs, but if frenzy is not on cooldown, knobs can break suppression with frenzy. but those are both sources of control. And now you also need a source of damage. So you need something like either a TAC plasma gun, a Tech Marine plasma gun, Vengeance rounds or Kraken bolts from Stern Guard veterans, something to follow up with damage. Lightning Claw Terminators is one of the obvious ones. And again, so you just really need multiple sources. You often just need, for just about any tier 3 unit, you need usually more than one unit to actually deal with it, unless it's another tier 3 unit. But, you know, and I think people also, one of the big things is that I think people get too obsessed with actually trying to, this is going to sound wrong to some people. People are going to misunderstand it and not get it when I first say it. But some people are actually overly concerned or a little too obsessed with balancing the game. And again, that sounds wrong, and I'm not saying that balance is undesirable, but I think some people are not realizing that it's actually not entirely possible to have absolutely perfect balance. And some people say that this prevents the game from being competitive, but it's actually, if you look at the history of competitive gaming, that's not necessarily the case. And I like to watch some other competitive games. In particular, I like to watch fighting games on YouTube. I like to watch Street Fighter. I used to play Super Smash Bros. Melee competitively, and I still like to watch that. And these are a lot of games that are not necessarily balanced. Some of them, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Marvel vs. Capcom, these are games that are extremely unbalanced, and they're also games that are also extremely successful competitively. I mean, we talk about Dawn of War 2 being old and dead. Super Smash Bros. Melee is a game that is now 12 years old. It had its largest tournament ever in July with over, I believe it was, I don't know if it was 700 or 600, either way, 700 or 600 people who attended an in-person tournament for an 11-year-old, no, a 12-year-old game. And again, I'm not trying to say that balance isn't desirable, but one of the things is that for the most part, I like the balance of the game as it is right now, even considering things are not perfect, even considering I main a hero who has some extraordinarily tough matchups, some really, really horrendously bad matchups, and I'm saying that I like the balance of the game pretty much as it is. And for something like a tournament, you might ask, like, well, how is that okay for a tournament? And one of the things that you can do, and both in like fighting games as well as this game, is you can counterpick. You can have other heroes. And as someone who plays the Sorcerer, although I haven't really entered tournaments in a while, if I were to enter a tournament, I would have counterpick heroes ready, other heroes ready to cover the matchups that are just really, really difficult for the Sorcerer. So, and this is something that I'm worried that some people are still going to misunderstand. Yes, it is desirable to have a game. It's desirable to have a game as balanced as possible, but there are limits to how much that is possible, especially for a game like this, which has so many matchups. I think a lot of the Company of Heroes crowd likes Company of Heroes because they've considered it more balanced. But part of the reason Company of Heroes is more balanced, or at least in theory is that it's a game that it's a lot easier to balance because it doesn't have as many matchups. They do have, they have the different factions. There aren't as many factions, and then, of course, in Dawn of War 2, we have the heroes, which are more influential in Company of Heroes. In Dawn of War than the heroes are, than the doctrines are, in Company of Heroes. So, and that's actually one of the things where the tournaments lately have actually had rules about you can only have 3 heroes, and that still leaves room for counterpicking. But I actually think, like, why not just let players have access to the full range of heroes? If they can actually have that kind of diversity of skill, if they can actually play more than 3 heroes effectively, then more power to them for having that kind of diversity of skill. But otherwise, I think they should. I feel like you should actually be able to access the full roster of the game's heroes if you're capable of doing that. I mean, for me personally, I have about like three heroes three heroes other than the sorcerer who I would trust to actually be able to win myself games with, and even those are kind of stretching it. And my overall capabilities with those heroes are not as good as the sorcerer, but they're just good enough for the sorcerer's tough matchups. But anyway, I'm sure this has gone on quite long. This game is almost over, and I think at this point, probably, I don't know if everyone has stuck around for this long, but hopefully if you have, I just want to say thanks to all the people who have subscribed and watched and supported, and still hoping to continue bringing Dawn of War 2 casts. I know that I've slowed down quite a bit, especially from the summer. Of course, from the summer, I went from being unemployed to being employed very part-time, only working like 10 hours a week, and now I'm trying to balance work and graduate school, so I'm quite a bit more busy. But, you know, I love this game, and it's been great both playing it and bringing casts, and yeah, I'm running out of words, running out of just everything. So we're just gonna say, I hope you have enjoyed my year of bringing casts to you. I know I have. Have a good night.